Symbol, Chaozu, Krillin, Gohan, and Bulma would set off for Namek, and as I mentioned, Symbol's ship is a lot faster than Kami's old spaceship, so they'll get there in 3 weeks rather than 34 days like in the original. Grandpa Gohan is a bit too old to go to space, so he stays on Earth. The guy's pushing 100 at this point, so, be reasonable. During the trip to Namek, Krillin and Chaozu would train together. He even decided to teach Gohan a little. Remember, he's not a fighter here yet, so this is his first introduction to martial arts at all. It's just the basics, but he does learn quite quickly, managing to pick up the Dodon Ray and the Solar Flare, and some basic telekinesis. With only 3 weeks of training, he doesn't make tons of progress, but he does have a lot of potential and manages to reach a power level of 150. He did almost blow a hole in the ship with the Dodon Ray, but thankfully Symbol blocked it. Now, Symbol didn't have time to train with him directly. He was flying the ship and teaching Bulma how to fly it. He was a bit anxious to arrive on Namek. After all, he may have the opportunity to meet his father's reincarnation. He had no idea what he'd even say to him. As for why they're going to Namek when the Dragon Balls are very much still usable, they just don't want to wait a year, and since there's another set of Dragon Balls on a planet the Galactic Patrol say is safe, why not? Goku is still recovering on Earth, so he'll have to catch up in the ship Dr. Briefs is making. By the time they get to Namek, Krillin has reached a power level of 2,400, while Chaozu lags behind at 1,800. The group would land and were immediately welcomed by the Galactic Patrol. The Namekians are much less wary of outsiders this time. They'd have no trouble going from village to village asking for the Dragon Ball. But Symbol did notice the attitudes of the Namekians towards him. They either reacted with fear or pity. They saw him as a twisted, tragic Namekian cursed with mutations. They wouldn't have time to dwell on this, however, as they would sense something approaching the planet. So, here's the thing. In the original timeline, Frieza's men head to Namek because they heard about the Dragon Balls from Nappa's scouter. Here, though, they don't know about the Dragon Balls because they never mentioned them. So Frieza doesn't have more than a passing interest in the planet. He knew the Galactic Patrol had taken an interest in Namek, and he had heard about Symbol being a mutant Namekian. All that to say, this is not nearly important enough for him to appear in person, but he'd send someone to check it out, Qui and a handful of other soldiers. The Galactic Patrolmen stationed on the planet would form a defensive perimeter around any nearby villages, and the Z-Fighters would set to work fighting the Frieza Force. The regular soldiers weren't too difficult, especially for Symbol. Elder Mori tried to move one of the Dragon Balls out of sight, but he was caught by Frieza's men who demanded to know what that ball was and why he risked his life to move it. Mori initially refused to answer, but when they threatened Dende and Cargo, the old man caved and gave them the information. One of Frieza's soldiers would be hit with a blast from behind. It didn't hurt much, but it got his attention. It was a Dodon Ray from Gohan. Gohan isn't a fighter, but he'd still do his best to stop them. Still, he just wasn't strong enough. The soldier casually backhanded Gohan, sending him sprawling. He then stomped on the boy's chest, laughing to himself. Gohan gasped, curling up in pain. Then he saw them point the weapons at Bulma, and Gohan's eyes widened. A white-hot fury consumed him and his power surged, energy radiating like fire around him. He'd explode forwards, his energy temporarily reaching 4,000. He'd knocked one of the Frieza soldiers out cold in a single blow and slammed his head into the other's face. The soldier would attempt to escape, but Qui shot him down.
Lord Frieza doesn't tolerate desertion, and neither do I.
Qui would knock Gohan unconscious with one kick. The kid was barely even moving. Remember, Qui might not have had a chance to do much in the original story, but his power level is at least 18,000, since Frieza was sure Qui could beat Vegeta. Symbol, Chaozu, and Krillin would attempt to fight him, but he wasn't even taking them seriously. He caught a punch from Symbol before driving his fist into his stomach. Chaozu held him still with telekinesis, and Krillin managed to land a few hits in, but the purple alien barely felt them. He'd break free of the telekinetic hold and headbutt Chaozu. Then he'd turn and fire a blast towards Krillin.
You're all insignificant compared to me.
At the last second, a new figure would appear on the battlefield. Piccolo. He effortlessly blocked the blast meant for Chaozu with one hand before glaring at Qui. So you're the invaders. You aren't very impressive. Qui would scan the Namekian's power level.
40,000! That's impossible!
Qui tried to turn and run, but Piccolo was faster. His arm stretched out, snaring Qui before he could escape. In one swift motion, he yanked him in and blasted him in the face, point blank. In Frieza's base, feeds would go dead one by one, as Qui and his soldiers were killed, but that hardly mattered to Frieza. He'd got some valuable information. He'd summoned Zarbon and Dodoria. Qui had encountered some Earthlings, so he'd take Vegeta as well, as he'd recently spent some time on Earth. Maybe his experience could be useful. Qui's team were just scouts, but now, Namek had Frieza's undivided attention. Piccolo would turn his attention to the Earthling crew, but he could tell they weren't a threat. He felt a spark of familiarity with Symbol, but he wasn't sure why. Piccolo? Symbol couldn't believe it. His initial goal of joining the Galactic Patrol was to find Piccolo. and I was right in front of him. Who are you? How do you know my name?
We are both the children of King Piccolo. Don't you remember?
Not really. He had vague memories from when he was younger, and he did feel some sort of interest in the planet Earth, but he hadn't even thought about it in years. Symbol didn't know how to respond. He was hoping Piccolo's reincarnation would give him some sense of purpose, I guess, but he didn't even know who he was. For now, he'd focus on the task at hand, doing his best to push aside his disappointment. With some time to recover and some medicine from the Galactic Patrol, Gohan was back to 100% in no time, and thanks to the Zenkai, he reached a power level of 1500. Piccolo would take Symbol, Chaozu, Krillin, and Gohan to meet Guru, while Bulma stayed at the Galactic Patrol outposts. The officers there would let the HQ know that Frieza seemed to have taken interest in the planet. They'd send a few more patrolmen to Namek, and they'd also work out a deal with a particular prisoner, Raditz. As a former member of the Frieza forces, he might be of use. Raditz would know how Frieza's organization worked, and in return for any information and his assistance on Namek, they'd half his sentence. A deal Raditz was all too glad to accept. Saiyans weren't exactly popular, and he'd had a rough time in jail. In fact, he'd gotten enough Zenkais to reach a power level of 7,500. He'd be sent towards planet Namek with the patrolmen. Piccolo and the others would arrive at Guru's place, where they would meet Nail and the old man himself, who offered to unlock their potential. Unlike the rest of the Namekians, Guru and Nail seemed to treat Symbol fairly cordially. Guru just saw him as another child of Namek. "Can't we just make the wish now?" Chaozu would suggest, but Piccolo shook his head. "If we let you make your wish now, what guarantee do we have you won't just leave once you've gotten what you wanted?" Piccolo was still fairly skeptical of this group. "Why would we do that?" Gohan asked, tilting his head to the side.
"I don't know. We just met you,"
Nail replied bluntly.
"You couldn't use them anyway. You can't speak Namekian."
The fighters from Earth wouldn't argue, and with that conversation out of the way, Guru unlocks their potential. For Symbol, Krillin, and Chaozu, I'm using the 5 times boost Krillin got in the Namek saga. So Krillin is now at 12,000, Chaozu is at 8,000, Symbol is at 30,000. Krillin got stronger after the initial boost in the original, but for now this is where they're at. For Gohan, it's a bit different. His boost was bigger than Krillin in the original, he got about 12 times stronger. So Gohan goes from 1,500 to 18,000. Around this time, Goku sets off for Namek from Earth. He should arrive in 6 days or so, and he can train on the way. Basically, his journey to Namek is the same as the original. "So, what's the Earth like?" Piccolo asked, slightly curious about the planet. He wanted to know why his predecessor was so fixated on ruling it. Krillin would just shrug. "Similar to Namek, I guess, in some places, but our towns are a lot bigger. Oh, and it gets dark sometimes. I know this planet has multiple suns, but Earth just has one." Before they could continue the conversation further, they'd notice a ship falling out of the sky. It was the ship from Galactic Patrol HQ. It crashed into the lake, and a few Namekians would go to inspect the wreckage. But as for the fighters, they had other things to occupy them. A second ship, this one from the Frieza Force. "You didn't need to shoot them down. You gave away our element of surprise." Zarbon would scold Dodoria as they left the ship.
"Whatever! Either way, they're just as dead."
Dodoria exited the ship with Vegeta in tow. Who would immediately recognize the people he'd fought on Earth? Piccolo, Symbol, and Nail would rush forward, Nail dispatching Zarbon in just one blow, not even giving him the chance to transform. Obviously Nail would beat Zarbon anyway, but here Nail has a power level of 75,000. Since he has Piccolo to train with, he's stronger. Dodoria opened his mouth preparing an energy blast, but Piccolo was faster, punching him in the face and driving a clawed hand through his chest, killing him. Vegeta attempted to kick Symbol, but Symbol blocked it before punching Vegeta in the face and throwing him to the ground below. Krillin and Chaozu, meanwhile, would dive into the lake to try and help any of the patrolmen on the ship, but the only person who survived seemed to be Raditz. Now, Chaozu and Krillin never actually saw Raditz in this timeline, so they just help him back to the surface. Vegeta, of course, does recognize Raditz and decides to try something. If Raditz is here, then the Galactic Patrol must be desperate. Maybe he could make a deal. He'd take his scouter off before crushing it in his hand.
"If Zarbon and Dodoria were no match for you, then Frieza will no doubt send the Ginyu Force next. Which means you'll need all the help you can get."
Vegeta would throw up his hands in surrender, and this did give Symbol pause. The Galactic Patrol knew about the Ginyu Force, of course they did, and he might be right.
"Fine, but at the first sign of a betrayal, you're as good as dead."
They'd regroup at Guru's, and Symbol explained the situation to the rest of the crew. The Galactic Patrol would treat Raditz's wound, but Guru's refused to unlock his potential, or for Vegeta for that matter. Vegeta didn't take much of a beating from Symbol, so he doesn't get a Zenkai here. He's still at 24,000. As for Raditz, he was almost killed in the crash, and once he was healed by the Galactic Patrol healing pods, he reached the power level of 25,000. They'd head back to Galactic Patrol's headquarters on Namek, and they needed to think of a plan. They knew Frieza's command ship was fast. They'd have 5 days at the most before they arrived. Speaking of, Frieza leaned back in his throne, a scowl forming. A backwater rock like Namek shouldn't have been a problem, but Kui was dead, and now Zarbon and Dodoria had gone dark. He'd clench his fist. He'd use the Ginyu Force to end this, and if they couldn't, maybe he'd need to get his own hands dirty for once. And that's where I'm going to leave it for now. Yep, sorry for not uploading in a little while. The next video was really killing me. I just couldn't think of a way to write Majin Buu in a way that I was happy with, and I was busy with college, but, you know, that's all wrapped up now. I should have a bit more time. Anyway, consider leaving a like if you liked it, or maybe even subscribing. Have a beautiful day, be kind to others, and most importantly, be kind to yourself. Bye.